And welcome to the Offensive Interference Podcast number 5. I am Gene Clemens. I'm football analyst for footballgameplan.com, a.k.a. the coach, a.k.a. preacher. Shout out to Lakeside High School. We all want to know. Congratulations. Those boys have been working really, really hard. And it had me thinking, because I was thinking about my quarterback, and it had me thinking about quarterbacks in general, especially quarterbacks in the NFL, and the debate over who's the best, or who works best for their team. The best thing about this argument is when those two quarterbacks come out in the same class. I mean, we had that a few years ago with Marcus Mariota and with Jameis Winston, and the argument at that time was that Mariota took better care of the ball, and that although Winston was a heady football player, he had some things to gain. A lot of the people in my circles didn't think it was relatively close. Full disclosure, that when Marcus Mariota became a starter at Oregon, I deemed him the next coming. I thought he was the next evolution of Michael Vick. He was longer, he was athletic, he had a good arm, and I thought that he had an opportunity to really embrace that role of a quarterback that also had the opportunity to take it to the house from 80 out as a quarterback. I fell in love with Jameis Winston's game because he was just the epitome of everything that you look for in a quarterback on the field: leadership, that gunslinger mentality, that opportunity to turn nothing into something, and then the ability to just put players in the proper place to make plays regardless of who it was. He threw the ball to everybody at Florida State. So when we fast forward to the NFL, it's safe to say, in my opinion, that if you're just talking about individual performance, Jameis Winston has had a better run than Marcus Mariota, whether that be due to injury, whether it be due to the style of offense that's being employed in Tennessee or in Tampa Bay. Regardless of whatever you think it is, the statistics in this matter don't lie. Now, you have to give Mariota a little bit of a bump because he has been able to see more team success. But as I've said in the past, that team success isn't a stat for a quarterback. If you don't employ it for the running back on the team, if you don't employ it for an offensive lineman on the team, how does the quarterback get an opportunity to add that to his overall repertoire? It is not Russell Wilson's fault that over the last few years the Seahawks have not made the Super Bowl. That's just silly. In essence, the reason the Seahawks haven't made the Super Bowl is because their team hasn't been good. Their team, not Russell Wilson, who outside of Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion, has been the second best quarterback in the NFL over that time. So when I look at Winston and I look at Mariota and I project them forward, Winston's the bigger, sturdier guy. Winston's the younger guy. Winston's the guy with the bigger arm. Winston's the guy with the better offensive weapons as receivers right now, in my opinion, outside of maybe the tight end position because Tampa Bay have a couple young guys. So I had to go to my man. A colleague of mine, a guy that I respect a lot, he is killing it, absolutely killing it in Tennessee right now. I'm joined right now by Turon Davenport, ESPN Titans reporter. Thanks for joining us, Turon.
No problem. I appreciate it. You know, it's always a pleasure talking shop with the Reverend. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and you know, always good to have you, and really respects to you for what you're doing right now and the impact that you're having down in Tennessee. I knew what you could do, and Eagles fans know what you can do, and now the Titans fans are figuring out that they've got a jewel on their hands down there. I want to jump right in with this conversation about Mariota and Winston. You were able to see both of them this week during the joint practices. Just give us an idea of what you saw.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's funny because we always have these conversations about styles of quarterbacks, right? And typically the quarterbacks that look like us, they tend to be able to get on the move and make plays, extending plays, and just, you know, making plays with their legs as well as with their arms. And that's been a stigma for guys like Russell Wilson, Colin Kaepernick, Robert Griffin III. But it's interesting because that's not a stigma for Marcus Mariota. And in this comparison that you're looking at, when you're looking at Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota, Winston is more of the classical drop back quarterback that will hang out in the pocket and deliver the ball down the field or what have you. But at the same time, he still has that ability to get on the move. You look at the game against the Titans, his touchdown throw that he was able to buy some time and deliver a ball that Chris Godwin went up and grabbed in a huddle of defenders. And then you look at the other throw where he was able to step up in the pocket, move to his right, and he threw the ball across his body to the other side, back side of the field, kind of like what you see Aaron Rodgers, the best quarterback in the league over the last 10 years, do. So I think when you look at Winston, you get kind of the best of both worlds. But Mariota, I remember when he was coming out, you mentioned looking at him, when he was at Oregon. When he was coming out, I made the comparison to Colin Kaepernick in that you could run that read option with him. You could also, he's a guy that you have to have absolute discipline in your rushing lanes when you're blitzing him or rushing him, because if you give him that small crease, he's going to find a way to take it a distance. So they're two totally different style quarterbacks, in my opinion. And I think it really comes down to what you want. But it's just ironic that in this case, kind of the roles are reversed as far as, what a quarterback looks like. And it's still not working in Winston's favor because you get so many people who favor Mariota. And I think that's where it gets into some of the stuff off the field that come into the equation. But end of the day, you're not paying a quarterback to win a popularity contest. You're not paying him, to win the Citizen of the Year award. You're paying him to help you win games on the football field.
And I agree wholeheartedly. I think that it's so overblown now that our football players have to be not only role models, but they're held to a standard that's above the average American. Things that would get the average American a slap on the wrist or a, hey, don't do that again. A lot of NFL players they're losing their jobs over. And it's just, it speaks to the hypocrisy of America that this is the case. Because when you look at a lot of NFL players, they look like you and I. They don't necessarily look like Marcus Mariota. I want to talk a little bit about Mariota because he looks a lot like quarterbacks that look like you and I from the past when he runs the ball. What have you seen from him as far as his maturity in the passing game? He's had a knock for not wanting to take the risk. Do you still see that as a case? Does he have that Alex Smith in him? Or are you seeing him have an opportunity to open up and really, push that ball down the field?
I think he's starting to push the ball down the field, and that's especially on play action. When you look at Matt LaFleur's offense, that it dates back to, Gary Kubiak and Kyle Shanahan back in the Houston days. And, with that, it's all about getting the quarterback on the move, that play action. But then it has those quick concepts that you saw last year from Sean McVay and the Los Angeles Rams. And the thing is, with that play action, that gives those longer routes time to develop because now your play action, that gives you max protection. Right, so you can push the ball down the field. And at least in practices that I've seen, Mariota has no hesitation going deep. One of the guys that he loves to go to is Corey Davis. They connect numerous times, and they're starting to move Davis across the formation. So I think you're going to see him emerge as a playmaker. But especially on that skinny post, he's not afraid to offer play action. He's not afraid to deliver that to him. But then you see him also going deep to some of the guys, like a Jonnu Smith, a Delaney Walker. Their 12 personnel package is really, with the deep threat ability that these two tight ends have, is really allowing them to do a lot of things out of play action. And I think he's doing a good job of now pushing the ball down the field. I don't know that I would call him a scary quarterback anymore. At least I'm talking about what we're seeing in the practices. Now, we'll see how that transfers into games. I mean, he's had 3 total drives so far in the preseason, and most of his throws have been, the shorter intermediate throws. But, I mean, they haven't called as much play action, allowing those routes to develop down the field. So we'll see what happens, how that transfers into games. But one of the things that Matt LaFleur and even their quarterback coach, Pat O'Hara, one of the things that they talked about was transferring what he's doing in individual drills to team period, and then from team period to game. So I think at some point you're going to start seeing him push the ball down the field.
Yeah, that's great, and because they need it. I think that with the running game that they have, it's really easy to take advantage of the play action, and you need a guy that's not afraid to push the ball down the field, not afraid to make a mistake. It's crazy how we've become so gun shy, or how players are being unfairly criticized on turnovers or interceptions. But when you look at Brett Favre, how many turnovers he has? Like, I mean, gosh, he turned the ball over all the time. He's still a Hall of Famer. Like, no one remembers if you win. No one remembers if your stats are gaudy. So I really look for him to take that next step. I saw something really great with Jameis Winston last night. I saw him hit Deshaun Jackson on a deep ball, and he hit him in stride. And we hadn't seen that hook up from Jameis Winston in the past a lot, because that is a place he struggled. He hasn't struggled with arm strength. He struggled with timing and placement of the deep ball. One of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL, Tyrod Taylor, the reason he's so good at throwing the deep ball is because his anticipation, his awareness of when to release the ball, when to, where to put it in order to allow the receiver to run right up underneath it. I think this is something that we've seen Jameis Winston get infinitely better at this year in camp. Would you agree with what you've seen this week and what we saw last night?
I agree 100%. That pass to Deshaun Jackson on that deep ball, LaShawn Sims was in coverage and he just simply ran right by him. And the thing that I like about Winston is it was, and receivers, we had that thing, Gene, if we're even, we're leaving. And as soon as he saw Deshaun even with him, or even not even, he was just a step behind him, and he let that thing go. And when you have a guy like Deshaun, you have to learn. And every quarterback that's worked with him, it took a while for them to get to that point where they're like, you know what? I simply can't overthrow this dude. So I just need to rear back. As soon as I see him even near being even to the DB, I got to let it go. And that's what he did against the Titans on that connection. And the other thing with receivers, they call a lot of us divas for a reason. We're very temperamental. And if we're not connecting on something that we like to do, like me personally, I always love to catch the dig route or the slant, and put my foot in the ground and get upfield. I wasn't a burner. So if you weren't connecting with me on that, I would get pissed off, and that's something with Deshaun. He loves to catch the deep ball. So you want to make sure that you're keeping him involved so that way he'll be a key part of that offense. And then also you mentioned the anticipation. On the Titans side of things, Luke Falk out of Washington State, Devin Ross, one of the rookie receivers, he had a huge step on the DB. And he had him beat. There was no safety over top, and he didn't anticipate the throw, and he doesn't have the arm strength to make up for not anticipating, and it was severely underthrown. Fortunately for the Titans, they got the pass interference, but they ended up only getting a field goal on that drive. A good throw, that's 4 more points because that's a touchdown. And I was talking with a fan about that, and it's always funny that you get a fan that never played the game, or you get someone who is fairly new to understanding how things happen, and they always have this opinion, and here it is, you're someone who actually been in that situation where you beat a DB and you're frustrated because the receiver didn't, or the quarterback didn't anticipate or have the arm strength to get you the ball, and now you've lost a touchdown, and that's what happened there.
Yeah, and I agree. For me, and you hear Turon and I say we, it's because we played the game. We played that position, and I know for me it was the seam route. If you could, I need you to hit me right between that area, where I could catch it and make that move on a safety and just leave him in the dust. If you threw it too far out and now it's a jump ball between me and the safety, I'm pissed. That's a 50-50 ball. It doesn't matter that I think I'm coming down with it 100% of the time. statistics say is a 50-50 ball. So I think that's something, and I remember people talking about that throw by Falk, and were saying that, oh well, the receiver has to come down with that, and I'm like, what? Like when I'm wide open, throw me the ball, or at least throw it to me so that I can become wide open while the ball is in the air. Speaking of young receivers, I know that you've been impressed with some young receivers for the Titans. Tell us about it.
Yeah, for sure. I tell you what, and Gene, we always talk about it, how people get so caught up in measurables. You look at Dalvin Cook in that situation. The spider chart didn't indicate that he'd be a good player. Well, when he was hurt, at the time, he was top 3 in the league in rushing. But, I mean, what do we know? I think that measurable thing really applies. And it's funny because I was talking to the Titans GM, John Robinson, about this. They plucked one of the better receivers in this draft class via undrafted free agent. That's Deontay Burnett. All he did at USC was produce. Go watch the Stanford game against a very good secondary. Watch the Texas game against another good secondary. And he's come in, and in the 8 or so practices that I've seen, he's made a play literally every practice. The dude is very consistent, and that's what you want. You don't want flash players. You want guys that do their job every time, all the time, and that's what he does. They're using him in stack formations, allow him to get that free release, and even when he's on the line of scrimmage and one of the corners attempt to jam him, he's able to get off that line of scrimmage and win his route immediately. I call him 7-Eleven because he's always open, to be honest with you. And when you throw the ball in his vicinity, he's catching the football. And that's something that you really have to like about him. I mean, he runs very crisp routes. His hands are very consistent. I love what he does after practice as far as getting on that jugs machine and catching numerous footballs off of there, different hand positioning, working on different ways that, you have to catch the football. These are little things that you don't normally see from a rookie. You see veteran guys, working on catching the ball this way, catching it this way, catching it this way, and all the different ways that he has to, position his hands to catch the football. So Deontay Burnett is someone that I definitely think has stood out. I don't know for sure that they're going to really unleash him in the preseason. In my opinion, what they're going to do is kind of let him get some reps, but I think they're going to stash him on the practice squad. They don't want to really allow him to do what he's been doing in practice in hopes that another team doesn't come and snatch him up. But also, I talked briefly about Devin Ross. He's another one, and he's, I think, like 5'10", 5'9", 180, but he's a very good perimeter pass catcher, and he's someone that I've seen on the deep comebacks, the deep outs. He always catches the ball. It's hard to overthrow him, so he's willing to jump up, and he has the body control to get both feet down. So those are two guys that have stood out to me. Nick Williams isn't exactly a young receiver, but I think he's a fourth-year guy, but he's someone that he's gotten to start in the slot. So he's another one, a playmaker. But I want to talk about someone on the Bucs side that impressed me this week, and it's someone that, Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook and the king of hitting gems, man. I remember a couple years ago he told me about this guy out of Penn, a white receiver by the name of Justin Watson. And let me tell you something. He's a really good receiver, man. You could play him outside, you could play him inside. He had a really nice catch on a deep pass against I think it was Durden, number 38. He hit for a touchdown, and he even contributed on special teams. But just watching him, he's big, he's fast, he's consistent. So he's someone that stood out for me as far as a young receiver perspective for the Bucs.
And speaking of Justin Watson, and I remember when Emory was telling us about him years ago, I liked him, and I liked him in the draft. I didn't like him for the Bucs, and I thought that we could have used that. Well, I say please, but I'm a Bucs fan, whatever. The Bucs could have used that draft pick on some other need. They could have drafted more linebacker help, more D-line help. They could have added another offensive lineman. It might have been a project at that point. But to have all the receivers that they have in place now, to add a dude like Justin Watson, does he have a legitimate shot to make that team, do you believe? Or is this something where they're hoping that they can stash him on the practice squad, and then if somebody gets hurt, now we can bring him in because it's targets are going to be hard in Tampa Bay. There's a lot of talent out there.
Yeah, because, I mean, we didn't even get into the tight ends. You know, your guy, O.J. Howard, as well as Cameron Brate, you know, and then they had Anthony Auclair, the Canadian. So there's a lot of targets that are going to have to be distributed. But when you look at receivers, I mean, obviously you got your four, you know, Mike Evans, Debo. I mean, you can't guard him. I don't care what you cannot guard him. So, I mean, we could talk about that, but I mean, the way he uses his basketball skills, and even it's rare to have a guy like that able to get those releases that he can too. I saw him turn Malcolm Butler around. He hit him with an inside step, took it back, and then brought it back inside. And Butler was just turning this way, and he just said shh, and caught it. You know, we're talking about 5 yards in the one-on-ones.
And it's fantastic too if you think about Mike Evans and the struggles that he had in his first couple of years catching the football.
Yeah.
How he's been able to improve where the ball really looks like it's sticking in his hands right now. You know, so you've got him, you've got Deshaun Jackson, some other guys that some other guys you think that are going to hinder Justin Watson from being able to get on the field other than those two in the tight end.
Yeah, so I think it's really going to depend on Bobo Wilson and you know, his health. I know that coaching staff likes him, so it's going to depend on it because that's 5 right there. Right? Are they going to keep 6 receivers? I think one thing that will work for Watson in his advantage will be his special teams contribution because he is someone that they use as you know, number 1 on the outside on kickoff team, and he had a nice tackle on kickoff team, so that could help him.
Speaking of that too, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Chris Godwin, who's had a fantastic, second camp. He came on late in the year. The fact that Winston has been getting a lot of reps with the twos is really going to help him because I think he's entrenched himself as that number 3 receiver. So now I think it comes down to Watson or Adam Humphries. Like, I think that's where you're going to find. I think Bobo Wilson gives you too much in the special teams to take him away. I think his ability to be explosive as a returner, if he stays healthy, his ability to be a gunner on your front team, to that athleticism that I think he possesses over a Watson or over a Humphries. I think that keeps him on the on the active roster as a special teamer. But Humphries is kind of like that 4th receiver, kind of a special teams guy, not as good as Shepard was when Shepard was with the Bucs. So now I'm looking at it and going, okay, is it a situation where it's Humphries or if it's Watson?
Yeah, and I think in that situation, I think they take Humphries because at this point, he's probably the better slot guy. I think he's a better option, a more consistent player as far as it's 3rd and 5. We just need you to run a jerk route, and I'm going to throw the ball whichever way you break. You catch it and fall down, and let's get the first down. You catch it and you keep running, that's even better. But your job is to move the chains, and I think that's where he comes in because he's so shifty out of that slot position.
It's interesting. I have a feeling that if Watson doesn't make this team, he won't make it to the practice squad. I think that, and I wouldn't be surprised if the New England Patriots come in and snatch him up. Like the Patriots have decided, they've decided that we love every white quarterback. I mean, every white wide receiver. Like, because America has devalued the white receiver, the value is in getting a white receiver. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
The country has decided that white guys can't play receiver, white guys can't play running back. So you get a guy like Christian McCaffrey, which, let's be real about it, if he was black, there would have been no doubt about his skill set. No doubt about whether or not he should be a top 10 pick. But because he was white, his size. If I hear another person talk about size and skill, I'm gonna lose my damn brain. But
He only broke a 71-yard run running where?
Oh yeah.
Between the tackles, right?
Yeah.
Against what? 25 men in the box?
Wasn't like he ran a sweep and just outran everybody, which, by the way, white running backs aren't supposed to be able to do that either. They're not supposed to be able to outrun people, but, what do we know? I'm just only sticking up for black quarterbacks. But, a guy like Watson, a guy like, him being able to get to the practice squad. Can he beat out Bobo Wilson for that fifth guy? It's going to be difficult. I don't think he gets to the practice squad if the Bucs don't keep him on the roster, and I think that's something they're going to have to consider because he's not only a guy who's got some polished skills as a receiver. He fits the mold of the Buccaneers wide receiving corps. He's a bigger guy. He's able to use his body. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with him. And I know, those receivers, those young receivers that the Titans have, those dudes are dynamic. Davis and the gentleman that you were mentioning before, Taylor, excuse me, they're different breeds. They have dynamic offenses, and it'll just matter about how they use them and how many people they can get on the field. A guy that I want to talk about and get your opinion on what you've seen is Ronald Jones, the third round pick for the Buccaneers. A lot of people have been disappointed, and I think they've been disappointed because they want Ronald Jones to be something that he hasn't been. There are no Marshall Faulks. So I know the people are in love with these guys who are catching and running the ball and like, oh, he's not Alvin Kamara, he's not Hunt, blah, 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 blah. But they're not Marshall Faulk. At the end of the day, the skill set of a running back is supposed to be to run the ball. And all I keep hearing is Ronald Jones can't catch. Ronald Jones can't pass protect. So that means he can't be on the field on third down. And I'm like, who cares? You have You have Sims who can catch, who can block to put in on third down. You have Barber who can catch, who can block. Although I would argue, who cares catching? And so the idea that the Buccaneers should be all in on Barber and should be selling already on Ronald Jones because he can't catch and because he's 205 pounds and not 215 pounds. Just talk to me about what you've seen and then what you think about that thought process.
Yeah, I saw them try to get Ronald Jones to the outside on a couple runs during practice. I did see them throw him the ball just on the circle routes coming out of the backfield, running the flats also. But like you said, you have to use a player to his best ability. And when you look at Ronald Jones, I don't care if he's 205 pounds or 195 like he was before the draft. This is a guy that you can run inside. And believe it or not, he actually runs with some power behind his pass. He's not easy to tackle. Go back and look at some of his games at USC. And for me, when I look at Ronald Jones, I think it's way, way, way too early to form an opinion on him, a negative one that is, on him in the NFL. Because when you have these running backs like Ronald Jones that, you know, are guys that hit that hole and go, you know, look at a lot of his runs at USC. They were just, he didn't have to allow his blocks to develop. He was just able to hold open, he hit it, and then the next thing you know, he was gone. At this level, blocks take longer to happen. So as a running back, you have to better develop that patience. You have to be able to better allow your blocks, allow your offensive linemen to get these guys out of the way. And that's something that when you see a running back, you know, not have a long run like Ronald Jones is capable of, all of a sudden you think that he's not good. It's not that. It's just, it's an adjustment. And that's something that we have to understand. It's an adjustment for him at this level. So, you know what? Not every running back comes to the league and has that patience that you need right away. Not every running back is going to run the football like Corey Clement did in spots for the Eagles last year. It's going to take time. And that's something with Ronald Jones, and even Coach Cutter talked about that after the game against the Titans, about working to get Ronald Jones into his own flow. And when he's talking about getting him into his flow, what he means is allowing him to be able to have that patience, to see the whole and allow it to develop. And then that's when you're going to start seeing him do what he could do. It's so overrated as far as his size. I mean, like I said, he's even at 205 pounds, he has a lot of speed. He runs behind his pads. He could fully be a guy that you could run in between the tackles. And one of the things that I like looking at the Bucs, especially once he gets going, you're not going to see 8 in the box. You're going to see things spread out a little bit more. And then not to mention when you have the tight end in the game, you have one of the best blocking tight ends in O.J. Howard that could seal that edge and allow him to get outside on those outside runs and get to the alley and use his speed. So I think his running style is perfect for the Bucs because that gives you that home run hitter to go along with your home run hitters on the outside in the passing game of Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson.
And that's really where I've been with is I like Peyton Barber. I think he's a great complimentary back. I don't think he's a feature back. I think that there are plays that he makes where his 5-yard run is another person's 8 to 10-yard run. His 15-yard run is another person's 30-yard run to a touchdown. I think that ends up being the difference between those guys who can carry the mail or who should be carrying the mail and those guys who should be assisting the person carrying the mail. It's not a diss on Barber. That's who he's always been. I mean, and so, like, when I hear people go, oh, well, Barber's the guy or Jones can't be the guy, my simple retort is that what are you looking for in a back? Are you just looking for someone to be okay, or are you looking for dynamic? And if you're looking for dynamic, clearly the upside on Jones says dynamic if we put him in the right situations. I also think it's interesting that when we look at these preseason games, Ronald Jones hasn't run behind anybody who's going to be blocking for the Bucs come day one. That makes a really big difference, fellas. Like, I don't think people get that when they're trying to evaluate these players. They do it with quarterbacks. They give quarterbacks every excuse in America. But when it comes to every other position, they don't mention it. Wide receivers struck. Why are the Bucs wide receivers doing so well right now? Because Jameis Winston is coming in as the second quarterback. So Jameis Winston is going to get the ball to Watson a lot better than Fitzpatrick's going to get the ball to Watson because Jameis Winston is a better quarterback. He's sure as hell going to get it to him better than Ryan Griffin is because Ryan Griffin shouldn't even be in the league. So when we look at these types of things and we look at these players, we have to take into account what the surroundings are like. And right now, Ronald Jones, all of his snaps are coming with the second team and the third team. And on offensive line, unless somebody gets hurt, you're not going to run behind those guys. So when we get into the regular season and Ronald Jones is allowed to get his carries, whether it's 5 carries, 4 carries, 3, whatever it is, he's going to be doing that behind the first offensive line. And when he does that, I'll be really interested to see how he looks when he gets an alley and he can break through that alley. And now that 205 frame that everybody is concerned about is running his legit 4.4 speed. We'll see what happens then. I want to finish off with you here, TD, because I know that it's been a conversation in our circles at Football Game Plan. We talk about it. We see it when we go places. We know, and at the end of the day, at footballgameplan.com, we go with the moniker where football makes sense, but it's different. It's deeper than that. It's the fact that we understand the game from a level that most reporters don't understand the game from. And it's not a diss on reporters. I went to college. I'm a journalism major. I have a degree in this field. It's different. There are a lot of journalists that are in sports who don't love sports. and they're in sports, they're covering sports, and they don't really understand the intricacies and the nuances of that sport. They're just covering it for these players that are, quite honestly, they're embarrassing, or they're elementary school questions. So just speak to the fact that you were a player, and now as a player who covers the sport and who asks questions and is able to report on it, what leg up does that give you over the guys or girls that have not played the sport before?
I think it gives you an instant respect factor, and that's something that I've experienced here. I mean, I have the coaches, I have some of the players, they call me by my first name. They appreciate what I bring to the table. And a good example of that is two conversations, actually three, I had last night. I had, after the Titans and Bucks game, I talked to Taywan Taylor about being able to catch the football and turn himself into a running back immediately. He loved the question, and he gave a very in-depth answer about how he was able to do that. Additionally, talking to Dion Lewis and getting him to get into detail about the leverage and how you're able to, make yourself available to the quarterback running choice routes and declare yourself which way you're going to go. And he went into extreme detail with that, and the respect factor is just there. Even Marcus Mariota, I continued my conversation from Dion Lewis to Mariota and asked him about just connecting and trusting Dion Lewis to make the right read on the choice routes. And he talked about reading his body language and knowing he's going to be decisive and showing where he has to go. These are things that players respect, and they always give you more in-depth answers. And you see that when you get the emails with the transcripts, and you'll see the better questions always get the more in-depth answers. It's a paragraph or two as opposed to a couple sentences. And it's just being able to get them to have those good touching points and get them to talk.
And I know you've seen this for yourself. There's been times where you ask a question to a coach, and the coach's eyes light up, like, oh, like he knows. This isn't, hey, how did you feel about your team's performance? Anybody can ask that question. But when you ask the coach, hey, on third down, you went bunch, and you really were able to outflank the defense. Like, was that something that you thought through evaluation that you were going to be able to take advantage of, or was that just something you were trying to see what they gave you? All of a sudden, they're like, oh snap! Like, he's paying attention to the game.
Yep.
He's not
they
just
appreciate that.
Yeah, they appreciate when we're not just paying attention to the splash moment. Anybody can commentate on touchdowns. Anybody can commentate on big plays. Anyone can, speak about, oh, well, you had, 100 yards rushing. What led into that 100 yards rushing? How impressive is that 100 yards? Was that 100 yards on 25, 26, 27 carries? Was that 100 yards on 18 carries? There's a big difference, and so being able to understand that, being able to understand the nuances of the game, I really do believe helps us. I've had countless, I know that you've had, Emery's had, TJ's had, countless interviews with players and coaches, personnel people who, when you ask them questions that allow them to know that you played the game without having to just boast, hey, I played the game. I don't believe you've ever walked up to anyone and said, hey, by the way, I played. People just know. Because when you speak in a manner of somebody who's been in the fire before. And that makes a big difference, in my opinion. Is that, would you say that's the same for you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And even the fans appreciate it because a lot of them want to know the story behind a play. They want to know why things happen. And being able to ask the questions to get the players to elaborate and the coaches to elaborate upon what it is that they saw and what happened, it really excites the fans also.
Definitely. And I appreciate you joining us, TD. It's been a fantastic conversation.
For sure.
If you're not following Turon on Twitter, Turon, give them all of the places they can find you and where they can find what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. On Twitter at @TDavenport_NFL. It's the same thing on IG, on Instagram, and I have a Facebook page at Turon Davenport. It's all Titans news there. Be sure to also subscribe to the Titans updates via ESPN.com. And oh yeah, books. We have books out, folks. So we have 2 books via Football Game Plan, Football Love Story, and What Did Football Teach Me? These are over 100 stories and feedback from players and coaches and all type of significant people in the game, telling us what they loved about the game and telling us what it taught them. So those are 2 things that you could definitely look at. Also, you go on BarnesandNoble.com. Carson Wentz, Soaring with the Eagles. That's a book I have out as well. So definitely be sure to show your support. I appreciate it. And Gene, I appreciate you having me on.
Anytime, TD. You're a brother. You know what I'm saying? We're in it. When we go 4 wide, our team, there's no other team stopping us when we go 4 wide. We've got the best in the business, and you're definitely, one of those guys that arrow points straight up. So I appreciate it. And looking forward to continuing to watch how you progress with the Titans. It's going to be a great season. It's going to be a really interesting season to cover. And so I think that'll be a lot of fun for you. Again, thank you. And to all of you out there, thank you for making sure you check out this offensive interference podcast brought to you by footballgameplan.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Gene Clemens, IG at Gene Clemens. Come subscribe to my YouTube page, Gene Clemens. Catch me on Facebook, Gene Clemens. You know what I'm saying? Just continue to support, and we appreciate it. And we'll talk to all of you soon. Y'all have a great one.